All right, it is 7:00 p.m. It is the appointed time for our July legislative meeting. Please come to order, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take a roll call, please.
President Dober,
Present.
Vice President Jones,
Present.
Commissioner Williams,
Present.
Commissioner Dara,
Present.
and Commissioner Duplaga is traveling, and Solicitor Stone.
Here.
Well, thank you everybody for being here tonight. Welcome. Let's see here, July 2017. Turning to our agenda, I guess I forgot to announce our recording. Everybody here is aware. We record all of our meetings, and they are streamed and recorded and posted to the internet. So everything you say can be heard both immediately and forever online. So be on your best behavior. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the workshop meeting from last week.
I move to approve the minutes of the workshop meeting of July 10th, 2017.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Let's hear some public safety reports. Please.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening, Chief.
See you. Good to see you. Following is Collins police activity on Upper Township. This is past one. There was a theft report from a residence. He believes he had garage doors open and a DeWalt multi-tool and a tool belt and a saw was taken. Left the garage door open, wasn't sure. He thinks it may have been some teenage kids, but he's not sure. Another theft from over here at World Vision. They had two big steel doors taken, and we tracked down the individual that took them, and he admitted to it. He scrapped them, and he's being charged with that. This is another stuff taken from a dumpster in one of the buildings, and some scrap metal. Ordinance violation. I'm having trouble with this group that's going into a lot of the communities, and they're soliciting products for pest control and whatnot. Kind of worried with our solicitor, and it's kind of difficult to deny permits to people. Once you, I'm sure the solicitor can, once you establish a process for applying for a permit, regardless of past interactions you have or different things, it's difficult to deny them a permit. Am I correct, Ron?
Yeah, unless you do a background check and you find something in the background check that raises suspicion or.
Of an individual, but
Right.
not the company. And that's what this company is on a blitz. They're all across the country, and I did a little research on them. And there are several lawsuits that have been filed in communities that deny them permits. They just seem to go, they'll get a permit in one community and just go into every other community. And they don't realize that Pennsylvania, so, you know, compartmentalized where we have 126 municipalities in one county. And it's real simple to go from one street to the next street in another community. And they're not understanding that, nor do I think they care personally. But I've done everything I can, and I think we just have to deal with them. So they're in the process of getting permits now, and you may see them again. The name of the company is Aptiva, and they sell like a subscription almost to. They'll come in and do any kind of pest control, ants, roaches, bugs, fleas, whatever it is, all that they can do. So I'm not making any comments about the company or what they do, but there's some of the ordinance violations that we've had recently. We did cite a couple of them for not having a permit, and we has to be dealt with at the magistrate's court. All we can cite them for is an ordinance violation. With that said, get dispatched on Timber Lane for a sound of metal rubbing together. Upon arrival, it was discovered that the noise was a washing machine. Don't make me see something. Hazardous condition, gravel on the road. I don't know what the rest in there. Vehicle lockouts, a lot of those. Trees down, in storms, trees down. Lost and found. This was a resident from the village. They were from the Sonic Village. They were found. Just a relative could not locate them. It was just a communications issue. Careless driver report, assist other agencies. That was dealing with individual that had a warrant on them. People have been talking about it. One individual has since been arrested. That was from an incident from another community, not ours. And then some 911 hang-up calls. That's my report. Any questions?
Yeah, I have two questions. Number one, with the Aptiva thing, I want you to help me say exactly what I'm going to say in the digest. Aptiva is a company that's been cited for ordinance violations.
Not the company, individuals.
Individuals from Aptiva.
From them have been cited for not obtaining proper soliciting permits in communities within our jurisdiction.
And they're now getting new permits.
They're
So you may see them soliciting in the neighborhood for pest control
We
service.
currently have a pile of individuals that what we require is that they do is a police background check. They have to send in, get that background check, and then they fill out an application along with that background check, the individual's name, copy of the driver's license, some form of ID. And at that point, I have no recourse other than to issue, because that's the ordinance states that they must do this. So
Okay.
when they do that, then.
Okay.
Now, in the course of them conducting business, if they do something that they shouldn't do, then I can ask them to leave. That would be something. And we had an incident in another community, not in this group, but another group. Where, that's not even about me. But if the person has a sign on his door that says no soliciting or no trespassing, they must respect that. And that's another reason we can tell them that they need that to leave. It's a difficult thing because they're all honest people. These citations we issue, we absolutely nothing to them. They just ignore them. They don't do anything. They don't even follow up. It's a difficult situation.
All right, thank you. That was my first question. My second question was, I had a phone call between meetings from one of the residents of the Manor townhouses, asking about some teenagers that have been up there. What do you know about that? What can you tell us about that?
Mr. Jones and I have gone up and met with the manager up there and just discussed the situation. And it's an ongoing investigation with a couple of individuals that reside up there that have been involved in numerous incidents. Not so much our area, but other nearby areas. And hence was the one report I had there with the warrant that was another community and there's some other things that they're currently under investigation.
So the resident that called me was expressing specific concerns that these individuals are violent. Is that true?
I don't want to classify them as that. I mean, that's not for me to classify an individual. I can say that we're. What happens is information gets passed around communities, and they don't have the correct information.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to get the correct information.
So I know you talked last time about doing certain things in executive session.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is, I just have to ask the question so I know what to do. if we're getting into an ongoing investigation or something that the chief is currently investigating, I think we have to we need to consider the confidentiality of the investigation. And so we could do that in executive session, we could get more detail, but again, I think if we're gonna get into an ongoing investigation in specifics, we ought to go into executive session.
And I'd like to do that. But I'd also like to have answers to the resident who called me and was asking questions about, is this are people safe in the manor?
Oh, yeah, I mean, as with any resident, it'd be difficult to put a particular label on any individual and then tell somebody else that this person is this or that. So I for one, I would feel comfortable doing that. I say that there are investigations going on with individuals that have done some things and taken things and done that would make you think that, that they had propensity towards acts that weren't just so easygoing, normal type things. But with that said, it's difficult for me to explain because I don't want to accuse anybody or anything like that, so it's difficult for me to really give you a lot of information.
Chief, it's fair to say that you and your department are aware of the situation. You're monitoring it,
Yes, sir.
investigating it, trying to.
It's a lot of departments. There's probably 5 or 6, maybe even 7 departments that are involved in different investigations that are kind of overlapping, and it involves individuals, from our area and other areas in the valley here.
Would
You
you
would
have,
feel more comfortable at some point having the resident call me, and I want to speak to them personally and kind of show them that everything's fine. I would be glad to do that.
okay. Would you be willing to increase your patrols over there?
I don't think that's going to make any difference. I mean, if it makes them comfortable, the guys have been. Well, maybe from that area, but they've been spending a lot more time up there. We have an extra car out. It's been going up there more often than not, and then the K9 guys have been going up there a lot. Just visibility. At this point, that's all you can really do. Just be visible.
Okay.
I think I can say outside of executive session that Susan Moran, myself, a detective, and chief had a very good meeting. I feel very comfortable that they're on top of this situation. The question of violence was brought up, and I think the chief is correct. It doesn't appear that that's the issue, but they're on top of this whole event.
I mean, at some point, if you want to, we can sit and talk here for a minute in executive session, let me fill you in a little.
Okay. Why don't we do that?
Okay?
Yep. All right, emergency management.
The training, the Emergency Operations Center training is this Saturday from 9 to 1. So show up, bring a pencil and paper, and Judy will lead us through some mock exercises so that we all get familiar with our roles and what would happen in a disaster.
Are we going to be inside, outside, or both?
I think I expect us to be here.
Did you get my email about a week ago?
Mm-hmm.
I said I could be here, but I might have to leave half an hour early.
I did not get that, but okay, that's fine.
All right, anything else in emergency management? Public Works.
Put a lot of work into the park, cutting down dead trees and taking out underbrush. You've ever driven over to see what we call the park? You know what's that? It was over there. But we had the reason we started over because we had a dead tree that was leaning towards Bolt Carter's house, which we had to remove. And then while we were there, we proceeded to clear out the underbrush. So there's a lot more to do over there, but we're going to be back in the fall and address some other issues over there. And of course, cutting grass through not the township because the rain is going to slow up on us. And Rhodes Avenue, we cut out the street and installed a 6-inch pipe in a catch basin down there. And then the one dump truck, we're putting new panels in the bed because at that point there's getting holes in it because of the age of the truck. But we're just doing that in spare time on rain days and stuff, filling in on that. Then back at the salt building, we had to dig up and put a new drain line out of that catch basin because it just started still. And now we got to redo the asphalt back there because we got to dig it out to put a new line back there. Any questions?
Nope.
Road work on schedule?
They're supposed to get back to us. We did met with them, Youngblood, marked the roads, and they're supposed to get back when they're going to start the job.
I think everyone got delayed for a couple of weeks because of the rain.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, because when they stopped there, they've been working over in Hopewell. I guess imagine the weather's not that way tonight.
Yep.
They're only figuring a couple days of being out here.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
As for communications, I have just one email that I received in response to last week's digest. This is from Chris Leonardo. Thank you for these emails. I am definitely unhappy about the water/sewage bill. I still feel we pay for many of the Aleppo Township originals who found the tapping fee to be too expensive. I hope I'm wrong, but it seems to be the case. Hope all is well with you and your family. And I think there was one more that I got. Give me one sec. This is from Carol Resnick. Matt, I've watched the videotape portion of the discussion of videotaping. I am absolutely opposed to not recording meetings. That being said, I do agree that when it comes to contract negotiations and/or other actions, they should be in executive session. I am guessing this would mean punitive actions. I would highly suggest and agree with the idea that the guidelines for an executive session be tightened up. However, the guidelines need to reflect very specific instances. Not recording these sessions is exactly why there was trouble before. Even though I don't attend, I am quite interested. Thank you, Carol Resnick. And that's all I got from last week. Planning and zoning?
No report.
Tax collector.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
A copy of the report that I gave you for this month and kind of the ongoing. As far as taxes being collected for the month of June, we collected about $79,381.39. On page 2, if you kind of look at the total for the year to date, you kind of see for the comparing to the budget, we're about $87,000 off. Just kind of give you an idea of where we're standing right now, so not too bad with that. As far as the account balances go, we have the PNC checking account and then the Pliget investment accounts, which is the state fund, the general investment fund, the reserve fund, the capital improvement fund, and also the sewer bond and sewer capital funds. So if you add up what we have on hand right now, we have $1,898,642.16. When we subtract out the pledged funds, which is the capital improvement and the reserve fund, and also the targeted funds, which is the liquid fuels fund, also known as the state fund, we actually have net operating funds of $1,152,252.22. And then down below, we have the 2 sewer accounts tallied for you as well. The back 2 pages of the report is just kind of the month-to-month comparison from June of this year to June of last year. So not a big difference there. Comparing the year-to-date to our budget right now, and then obviously the 2016 year-to-date
to the budget during that time period, and then the 2017 to 2016 comparison. So, any questions or anything?
Would you agree combining two line items? First, in the 217, 216 year-to-date earned income tax, we are ahead of schedule, 36,000.
Mm-hmm.
And would you anticipate that therefore our earned income tax year end will also be more than the current 63,000 shortfall? I mean, isn't that pretty predictable?
Yeah. Which where are you again?
On page two,
Page 2.
the earned income tax.
Yeah.
Year-to-date 217 as opposed to year-to-date 216, 36,000 in the black, right?
217. You're talking the 36,000 variance,
Yes.
that one?
Yes. In other words, are you anticipating more than is budgeted for earned income tax in 217?
Probably not much more, but
Okay,
you kind of depend on when the employers and everybody pays into it. So,
Good.
and the timing of it will put to you that way.
So if this is a variance, not a hard number, so to speak.
Correct.
So are we going to end up close to or exceeding budget?
My guess would be yes.
I mean, it's very predictable.
Yeah.
Comes in every month.
As you start to
should
see
be.
this now.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So for future budgeting purposes, yeah, that's something we'll probably want to consider.
Okay.
Because while we're here, audit is underway.
Far underway.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Under the finance, there's a motion written there. I'll entertain.
Yeah, I had it here. No, I'll cover it up.
I move to approve the June bill list in the amount of $25,758.45, to ratify the June prepaid bills in the amount of $10,157.22, and to ratify June payroll transfers in the amount of $17,444.41.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Aleppo Township Authority.
No report other than the fact that we are fully manned on the commission now.
It's excellent.
And the new person, Rich, was very active at the last meeting.
Good.
Jumped right in.
Good.
All right. As for COG, you'll see in their packet, there was a memo dated June 30th, 2017 from Susan Hockenberry. This is a new effort to try to tidy up this portion of everybody's individual meetings. So she's trying to boil out all the activities of the COG into something that you can read and take home. In short, the new initiative there is what they call the PI team, which stands for Project Ideation. They had their first meeting, and they're trying to come up with intergovernmental projects. And the things that they came up with were data mining for revenue collection improvements, library facilities and emergency management coordination, and ironically, digital document management, which we'll talk about later in our meeting. The COG also had a hard to recycle event on June 24th, 2017. It was very well received. This was the first time that they've done a hard to recycle event where they didn't do it themselves. So they outsourced organizing it and the management of it. You'll see the numbers here: 500 vehicles, 25,000 pounds of TVs, small appliances, electronics, and batteries. There's another hard to recover event on September 23rd at Avalon Community Park. There were some COG interns that worked with managers and secretaries. We didn't have any participation in that, did we? There are details about their CD 42 fiscal year community development. CD is community development. So they finished their projects and they started their next project year. The COG is slated to administer $440,000 in CD community development block grant money in in that next project year. The audit for the COG is underway, as is ours. Unfortunately, Commissioner Scullert's not here to hear the triumphant news that the COG annual dinner is coming back this year. Y'all want to mark your calendars, I'm sure, for October 18th, 2017 at 7:00 p.m. Hospitality to start at 6:00 p.m. at Cafe Note on Ohio River Boulevard. And I will say no more. Next COG board meeting is July 19th, 2017. It's a business meeting. That's Wednesday for those of you who are playing along at home. And that meeting is here at Aleppo. So if you have any interest in coming to a COG meeting, this is an easy one to come to.
Is that a board meeting or pie or both?
That's a board meeting.
Okay.
So we'll be here. And I personally want to thank Commissioner Williams. I've had a really busy, I don't even want to say a couple or a few months. It's been many months. And Art has really been great and very gracious in terms of popping in there at oftentimes at the last minute. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I know Susan appreciates that.
You're welcome.
So there it is. That's the new and improved COG report.
One quick comment, as we discussed, I passed along Tim Kelly's desire for a solar energy analysis. I might have been spammed, Gwen. I haven't heard back from her.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not, I'll check.
Yeah, thanks.
Ambulance Authority?
No.
I have just one little tidbit is that in our ongoing quest to produce 4 non-meeting videos this year, the executive director of the Ambulance Authority and I are meeting, I believe, on Thursday to do a video explaining what the Ambulance Authority is and how it serves Aleppo residents. And in preparing for that meeting, he and I have had some fascinating conversations about how that's paid for. I mean, things that had just kind of gone past me.
That'll be a goodie.
It will be. It'll be interesting. Stay tuned. Get excited. MS4.
The intern that was supposed to give our presentation has taken a bit of a personal leave from his internship. So we will not be having him come and speak to our meeting unless something changes. But I will be meeting with our engineer this month to see where we stand as far as any kind of waiver process. And since it's unlikely that we will receive any kind of waiver, where we need to pick back up in our process for documenting our efforts.
Approximately, where do we stand in that whole program?
At the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's very finite.
All right, solicitor.
First of all, speaking of acknowledgements, I don't know if you've talked to the board yet or not about your presentation at the summer conference for.
Oh, no, I haven't.
But I am a programmer and a co-solicitor for the Western Allegheny County and Western Pennsylvania Township Commissioners Association. And there's a Western Pennsylvania group, there's an Eastern group, and there's a Central group. And it's made up of commissioners, first-class township commissioners for the most part. And each one has their own separate conferences once a year. And then every third year, they rotate and they take turns chairing a summer conference, usually in the central part of the state for all 3 sections. And Matt is, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Matt's a member of the board of the organization. And of
the Western Pennsylvania organization.
Yes.
Yeah,
and this year and this summer at the summer conference, Matt made it. Not only was there as a representative, but of the board of the Western Pennsylvania board, but also as a program presenter, and did an excellent presentation that was extremely well received by everyone for about 200-300 officials on driverless vehicles and their impact on municipal planning for the future. And it was a really, really well done program. And so my gratitude as the programmer to Matt for giving such a really great presentation.
Well, thanks for saying that. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I may try to sign you up for the fall.
Happy to do
No
it.
good deed goes unpunished.
That's right.
So there are a couple of things that you may want to ask me about, which I anticipated, but I guess, in terms of my report to you, the most significant thing was just the summary I did in reviewing the, what I call the e-management policy or.
And that's on our agenda for later. So
Okay, so I'll save that. One thing I did notice also in going through your minutes, there were several references to meetings that our engineer had with Sewickley. I believe that was, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think that was the authorities engineer, Dave Kirshner, who met with Sewickley.
Yes, that's correct.
You may want to correct that on your minutes
Correct.
because your engineer is HRG.
Good catch.
Right.
And one comment to the email that you received from a resident about executive sessions. Just a reminder to the board that the executive sessions and when they can be used and how they can be used is regulated by the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act. We do comply with the Sunshine Act. So I just want to make.
So that's probably a good thing. Since we got that email and since you brought it up, why don't you tell us and everybody else when we're allowed to go into executive session?
There are, as I recall, 6 specific reasons for which you can convene an executive session. You are never required to hold an executive session, except in certain very limited circumstances involving personnel, with a police officer or an employee who doesn't want to have a discussion held about the personnel matter in the public meeting. Other than that, it's up to you whether you want to discuss any topic publicly or in executive session. The 4 that I recall offhand are any discussion involving personnel, discussions involving real estate, discussions involving any claims, litigation, threatened litigation, or any matter that would involve a claim of confidentiality. And again, that sort of fits into legal advice or kind of overlaps a little with the litigation and the claims exception. These are all exceptions to the public meeting requirement.
What about contract negotiation strategy?
As I recall, only real estate agreements, I think, are required to be done or can be done in executive session. So if it's just contract discussions, I don't think those fall under an exception.
So just so
that seems
clear,
right
so
to
for
me.
example, if we were to discuss a strategy in dealing with Sewickley's sewage rate increase, that's not done in executive session?
I would treat that as something that potentially could lead to a claim. And again, it doesn't have to be litigation. It can be a claim or something requiring legal advice that would come under a privilege, a common law privilege or a statutory privilege. But just a general discussion of a contract, I don't think fits one of the exceptions, unless it's real estate, sale or lease of real estate.
Okay, so why don't I stop us from floundering around here and let's just read the exceptions rather than trying to
There
get them
you
off
go.
our memory, okay?
See how close I came.
And just for reference later, this is from 65 PACSA 708. An agency may hold an executive session for one or more of the following reasons. Number 1, to discuss any matter involving the appointment, termination of employment, terms and conditions of employment, blah, blah, blah. That's employment. The provisions of this paragraph shall not apply to any meeting involving the appointment or selection of any person to fill a vacancy in any elected office. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, to hold information, strategy, and negotiation sessions related to the negotiation or arbitration of a collective bargaining agreement, or in the absence of a collective bargaining unit, related to labor relations and arbitration. So I don't think that relates to much of what we do. 3, to consider the purchase or lease of real property up to the time of an option to purchase or lease the real property is obtained, or up to the time an agreement to purchase or lease the real property is obtained if the agreement is obtained directly without an option. 4, to consult with its attorney or other professional advisor regarding information or strategy in connection with litigation or with issues on which identifiable complaints are expected to be filed. 5, to review and discuss agency business which, if conducted in public, would violate a lawful privilege or lead to the disclosure of information or confidentiality protected by law, including matters related to the initiation and conduct of investigations of possible certain violations of the law and quasi-judicial deliberations. 6, for duly constituted committees of a board or council of trustees of state-owned, state-aided, or state-related college or university or community college or board of governors, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't apply to us.
So I was pretty close.
So, I mean, back to Commissioner Dara's question, because I mean, where does that Sewickley fit in here? Where would you think that fits in?
Where would a negotiation over a sewer contract, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I, from what you said, I would take it to say that since Sewickley sent us a notice back in whatever it was, December, asserting a claim for a rate increase, I would take it as a discussion of a claim that could
Which
lead to
you may or
litigation.
may not resolve in the context of negotiations, which I think is an identifiable claim as contemplated by the act. That would be my interpretation. But again, keep in mind 2 things. The very first sentence you read, which is what I started with, you may call that into executive session. You're not mandated or required to have an executive session on that discussion. So again, I put it out there because it's in your discretion.
Right. But
Good.
our concern, I think, is when we're dealing with sensitive matters like that have great significance as well, there is a need to deal with those discussions in executive session if at all possible.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, just in terms of policy, let's go back to the chief's situation for a second here. My concern with that is there are a number of cases, there are reported cases that talk about if the chief gets up and says, I'm investigating certain people for certain things, and they are watching this meeting, it telegraphs to the people that are being investigated, 1, that they're under investigation, and 2, that the gist of the investigation may include certain things which law enforcement would otherwise prefer not to get out during the court, at least while the investigation is happening.
It's fundamentally the discussion we had last week when we were talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So again, these are just
Right.
my thoughts. I'm not telling you have to use your executive sessions. What I'm saying is the law does recognize and allow for the use of the executive session. And as long as you adhere. Now, having said that, not a lot, I shouldn't say that, a number of places have been known to abuse the executive session, and there's no question about it, and I share that concern as well. So there's a place, if you listen to NPR, there's a great, I gave it to Matt, there's a terrific, a podcast about a community in New York where the Orthodox Jewish community took over the school board. East Ramapo, New York, which is right across the line from New York. But and I've actually been there. But actually, what happened was They would call their meeting to order. They'd say the Pledge of Allegiance. And as soon as the Pledge of Allegiance was over, their solicitor said, I recommend an executive session. They would go into executive session and come out 4.5, 5 hours later, or even continue the executive session indefinitely till the next meeting. So that's on the other end of the spectrum. Certainly, there is abuse and the potential for abuse in how an executive session gets used. But my point in bringing it up to you as a board was simply to say, for people that ask, let's make sure that we use it properly. We are required by law to use it only in certain situations. And I think if we stick to that and we abide by that, and you use your discretion, I think we'll be able to meet the challenge of balancing public and transparency versus the need for confidentiality in a limited number of situations.
And that's certainly one of the things that we can do perhaps a better job of, is that we are, correct me if I'm wrong, required to explain why we're going to executive session and which of the 6 categories it falls into at the time that we adjourn into that executive session.
Well, yes, and not only that, but there's some pretty strong controlling case law that says not only do you need to state which one of the exceptions, but you need to state why, in terms of being fact specific to what you're considering, the exception applies to those facts. So you need to claim the legal basis, but you also need to identify at least sufficient facts to make it applicable to fact.
This is subsection B of that same consolidated statute we were looking at earlier. B, procedure. The executive session may be held during an open meeting or at the conclusion of an open meeting, or may be announced for a future time. The reason for holding the executive session must be announced at the open meeting occurring immediately prior to or subsequent to the executive session. If the executive session is not announced for a future time, members of the agency shall be notified 24 hours in advance of the time of convening, blah, blah, blah. That's not relevant.
So
the case law.
back to the example. So if we were to say we're going to an executive session to discuss our response to Sewickley's claim for a sewer rate increase, that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I don't even know that you would have to say that much. I mean, I think that the more that we say, the better, in order to balance out that. But I think
you have to say a little more than which exception. You need to do a little more than identify the legal basis. You have to also do something that identifies the situation itself that it applies to.
Okay.
And that was the case. That's the case law. Because what happened in the case was people were just saying, okay, we're going to go into executive session to talk about claims, or we're going to go in and talk about employment and personnel. Well, you got to do a little more than that.
Right.
I think we got that one covered.
Okay. Anything else from you, Mr. Solicitor?
No, I'll save my other comments for when you raise them in new business or old business
Or executive session?
or executive session, as you see.
Okay. So then let's turn to old business. And let's talk about the Leetwood Avenue property complaint.
I got an update from the building inspector. He has.
Why don't you back up before you tell us what's new, tell us what's old. Tell us what the Leetwood Avenue property complaint is.
There's a complaint about one of the properties on Leetwood Avenue and the condition of the property, concerns that it was structurally deficient. And there was the electric company did cut off the power to the house because of some poor wiring in the house. So the building inspector has gotten an update from the property owner's sister, who is assisting the property owner with getting the property repaired. And they have had an electrician come in, and the electrical inspection passed. The connections are now correct, so the power was being allowed to be reconnected to the house. They have a home inspector coming in to evaluate the condition of the interior of the house and to make any recommendations about any repairs that are needed inside, as well as looking at the structural stability of the roof. The property owners have been advised to clean up the yard there's a lot of trees and debris and brush and things, and that they reported they were having someone come in to start cleaning up the exterior of the property. The Another issue that has been brought up is that this property is not connected to the sewer system as is required by our ordinance. They have been paying for sewage all this time, because if anyone was not connected, they started getting billed right around the time that everybody else got billed. So that, they have been paying for sewage for this amount of time, but they have not been connected. And I just wanted to get the board's authorization to pursue connection. Pursue the process for getting them or notifying them that they need to connect and walking through that. This happened before during the project. It went to the magistrate, and because the property owner has some disabilities, it kind of didn't go anywhere. But now that there's a family member involved in assisting the situation, we have greater hope that maybe this will actually, some changes will be made. So I just want to get the board's say so that it's time to pursue that they connect because the ordinance requires it.
I move to approve you pursuing connection of this one house, correct?
It's the one property that is within the 250-foot requirement that is not connected.
Okay, so tell me exactly what language you want the motion to be. You want approval for what?
To initiate the process to require connection to the sewer system.
Commissioner Dare has more eloquently done it than I have, so I'll
Okay.
let Commissioner Dare make the motion, and I will second that.
Okay,
I move that you take the action necessary to initiate requiring the homeowner in this property to be connected to the sewer system.
I second that. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that point? All those in favor say yes.
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 All those opposed say no. Motion carries. With respect to the original complaint, I mean, it's an impossible question, but do you feel as if adequate progress is being made?
I do feel that progress is being made. I mean, it's a slow go, but it is happening. And
Okay.
right now, there's a lot of action at the property, and there's a lot of concern from the property owner's sister to really try to make these changes. So it isn't stalled. I would not call it stalled. It's not speedy, but it's not stalled.
And the other neighbors who have been unhappy in the past, are they feeling satisfied that this is moving forward? Or have you heard anything?
One was here 2 meetings ago, right?
Well, one's here. I mean, I just want to make sure that nobody feels as if this is not being attended to. And if you get that sense, I'd like to know that. Do you get that sense? Tough question.
You don't know what's going on medically in terms to address the
No,
homeowners
I mean, I can't.
situation.
Yeah, I can't. I can't speak for other people.
Are you having any direct connection with the conversation with the sister, the family member?
I have
should
not.
say?
It's right now. It's been the building inspector's been handling it. He is.
Well, Tom, what sense do you get from the neighborhood? Do neighbors feel aggrieved, continued, or satisfied, or where do things stand?
Just be saying, the only thing that's been done, the electric did get turned back on this week. You came, I hooked it back up. And they put stone in the driveway. And actually, you really can't see anything else that has been done since. I mean, last week, the sister was parked up there and she put the window down. I was so sorry for cutting all your trees down. You know, I said it's over and done with. And she told me that she's gonna plant pine trees down along the property. No time, but if it's gonna be done. And she said they're in the process of having a roofer come in. I haven't seen a roofer yet, but who's to say when somebody's coming in. So at this point, I don't know.
Well, I mean, not that not that we can snap our fingers and make all your
Yeah.
dreams come true,
Well, I
but let me ask you, I mean, what would you like to see happening more aggressively?
The property cleaned up.
But what does that mean, the property, to you,
All
as a
the
neighbor?
trees- All the trees and stuff he has cut down. It's, I mean, it's an eyesore. And I mean, I feel as a property owner, you should maintain your property. This has been going on too many years.
You know the ordinance is probably better than anybody, though. I mean, are there ordinances you think he's in violation of, other than just he has an ugly property?
Myself, structurally, I think the house. I've said that all along.
Has Jeff said anything about the structure of the house?
Jeff will be getting a copy of the home inspector's report, the independent home inspector's report, so he will evaluate it once he gets a copy of that.
Will we get a copy of that, or he'll just handle it? I'd like to see a copy of it. If we can, I don't want to.
I have to ask, yeah, to find out what his restrictions are, but yeah, let him know.
Is he back home? Is he back home?
I don't know, because I haven't seen her car up there since he was there.
He was taken to hospital. We were there to help facilitate that. But I don't know what status he's in.
Okay, well, I can't speak for anybody else on the board, but I'd like you to share with the neighborhood that it remains something that I'm concerned about, and I do not want you to feel as if it's being ignored,
No, I understand.
you know?
But I mean, hopefully, this time around, that things go forward. What she says.
Well, I get the sense, I mean, Gwen, would you agree that more has happened this time around than ever in the past?
There's been a lot of, yes, there's been a lot more concern and activity that we know is supposed to be happening. Remains to be seen what will happen.
Appears to be somebody there now that's trying to take charge of the situation.
Yes.
Is the home occupied? Or there, is someone living there?
Yes.
What are the consequences if the work isn't done in a timely fashion?
Well, the yard condition is just a property maintenance violation, so that's just goes to the magistrate and he says.
Is that a 90-day event, a 60-day event?
It depends on when the citation date is, that's, yeah,
But that was already in the original violation, right, wasn't it?
it was.
But there are time constraints and consequences.
But you also can't get blood out of a stone.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll keep at it.
Appreciate it.
Glen Mitchell Road Corridor Improvement, cleanup of Swickley Borough property. We have any update from Jeff?
No, I gave you Jeff's update, oh, you weren't here, Jeff's update last month that,
I saw it in the
Yeah.
minutes. Yeah.
and then, something for executive session or?
Well, no, I think we can do this publicly. You asked me, I think at the last month's meeting, I suggested maybe just a follow-up with the solicitor in Sewickley. And I just wanted to let you know, I did have that conversation. He and I have worked very well together in the past. I reached out to him. He said he would look into it. That was 2 weeks ago. He needed to talk, of course, to the people responsible, and then wanted to, and I said, just make sure they know that we're still actively interested in enforcing our ordinances, and that they understand that we're serious about it. And he acknowledged, and that was the last I heard.
Okay. Well, I mean, do I understand correctly that we want to talk about this further in executive session, or?
Oh, I think we should wait and see what the solicitor says when he comes back to Harlan.
Okay.
Last but not least.
I'll make a note to follow up.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, we've now tried to get some response through the Sewickley Borough Manager, through the president of the Sewickley Board of, whatever their council. We've had a couple conversations with the solicitor, and the pattern is always the same. The pattern is always the same when we do this. Somebody has to go check with somebody else. They'll get back to us, and not surprisingly, that follow-up never happens. They never get back to us. I mean, I think that the bigger issue right now is that we can't tell what's going on in there because the trees are growing in. This is the seasonal problem we have with this enforcement all the time too. But I can tell you when the leaves come off the trees, I want us to be ready to. There's a colorful phrase that I won't use in a recorded session, but I want us to be ready to take action or throw it away. So that's kind of, I mean, I'm happy if Dick Tucker can make it happen for us, that'd be great. And I'm not looking to be litigious. I'd much rather it get taken care of in a friendly way, but I don't want to be made chumps. How about Meaner? Why Meaner property?
I got an update from Officer Hartzell, and he said that the tire pile is getting significantly smaller. He did notice that there was one car that had front end damage sitting at the bottom of the driveway, and he was going to check on the status of that. Doesn't know how long that's been sitting there. 2 cars down there?
There's now 2.
There's now 2. Well, we know that's the procedure for
Right,
dropping off your car.
This morning when I went by, there was only one.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, she's right. People are probably dropping off their cars over the weekend, and he moves it up the hill.
Yes. So he's going to follow up. He's was off, and today, and he was going to follow up with a visit.
Looks a lot better than it has.
Yes.
Mhm.
So he was going to continue to encourage good progress in cleaning it up.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Electronic document management systems. I understand Harlan was going to give us a report on his review of the contract.
Yeah, so I broke it, I created a summary and I broke it into 2 parts. One was a conceptual points, just things to consider generally in adopting a electronic records management policy. And then the second one specific to the provisions of the Laserfish cloud agreement. So speaking as an overview, the good news is, one, you legally can create an electronic management policy that is consistent with the Municipal Records Act, which was my first concern. I've confirmed that with the state. In fact, I had an opportunity at the conference, Matt, to talk to the guy from the Open Records Office who referred me to someone at the Municipal Records Act, which is really the State Museum Association who regulates that. And he confirmed that you can do it and you can do it consistent with your responsibilities for record retention, which is really what the Municipal Records Act requires. Couple things though. One, you need to adopt a policy. It needs to be by resolution, and you need to identify what records you're going to dispose of, what records you're going to send to the cloud. So there has to be some process for separating and identifying where these documents are going and what you're doing with the ones you're not keeping. That's sort of the gist of my general concerns. Again, the good news being that provided you comply with all that, you can do it, and in fact, you're encouraged to do it. So I think that's important from a policy.
Your summary says that, however, we must retain paper copies of permanently valuable electronic records.
Right.
So what falls into that category?
So there is a definition in the act of what is permanent and what is not. there are a small group of documents which are considered to be permanent. You're incorporating records, your any ordinances, bylaws, governing documents, those are considered permanent. I don't know if meeting minutes are considered permanent. Now, keep in mind, it's not that you can't send those electronically and store them in the cloud. That it's not prohibiting it. It's just saying the permanent records as opposed to the non-permanent records, you have to also retain a paper copy in the office. You can still send it to the cloud, but you do have to retain the paper copy. And like I said, there are a limited number of things that are defined as permanent records. Okay, so that's.
And so that, I mean, I want to hear the contract review as well, but I think that Gwen and I agree that forming the policy would just be good practice anyhow, right? And it's something that I think we had always expected to do as part of this.
That's part of process and procedures.
Right, and I think you should do that anyway. Like you said, just I mean, you know, if Gwen's not here or someone else and doesn't know what to do, I mean, you want that policy,
Right.
especially if that's going to be your primary method of municipal management and record keeping. I mean, there ought to be a policy.
Okay, so take us to the real nuts and bolts.
Okay, so
So is there someplace where you can readily go that you can print out a suggested policy and the language that would go in a resolution, or is that something you have to make up?
Yes and yes. There are forms that are recommended by the by the Municipal Records Act, and we can follow those forms as far as the resolutions and the policy. You may want to adapt the policy to your particular situation, but the resolution's a standard form resolution, and those forms are
So can we get copies of those?
no problem. So the specifics on the agreement, look, I mean, for you lawyers and businessmen on the board, I think that's all of you. I can just tell you, it's a completely one-sided contract, and I guess, you know, the bottom line is, what do competitors have to offer if this is definitely a direction that you want to follow. And I think Gwen has already said other municipalities are using Laserfish, and we've used Laserfish in the past. I don't know how much of this is negotiable, honestly. As a lawyer, I've identified here at least 10 things I don't like about the contract. I think some of it we could probably get some level of comfort knowing that maybe we have some coverages, some insurance coverages that take away some of the sting of these risks that we're taking on. I don't know, again, what the answer is. I can try to negotiate it, but going, for example, to Commissioner Darrow's point, why should we have to go to Los Angeles for arbitration? Would it ever be cost effective for us to challenge anything in Los Angeles?
Well, not just that. I mean, California is kind of a quirky place. You can't just assume that their contract law is just like our contract law, because I suspect it's not.
And probably especially with regard to tech.
Right, right.
Yeah, but that being said, and this is going to be a thought that I have throughout a lot of this. I mean, we use Microsoft 365. I guarantee you, if you go and you look at the click-through license that we signed for that, it's got a form selection clause too, and it ain't Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but you do that individually, and that's a choice you make. The question that comes to me is, as a municipality, is it appropriate for
No, we as a municipality use all sorts of software licenses. We have all sorts of software licenses that have what I'm sure are very similar, one-sided language, entirely one-sided language. Microsoft's not giving you any.
Okay.
Sure.
Don't you disagree?
Well, I still would raise it. I still would raise it. And ask him, I mean,
Oh, I'm happy to do it. I mean, I'm happy to do it. We asked the sales guy, who's obviously he's not the negotiator, but we asked him if there's any room for negotiation, and his response was basically not much.
Not much. He said he has not had luck in the past with other clients who might want to negotiate with Laserfish. It's pretty standard agreement, but if he had any specific things, he would facilitate.
Well, they're not gonna wanna change their form.
No, they're
Okay?
not.
And they're gonna be reluctant to change the form. I've been through it before. But we'll say this, there are some things, and I'm shocked that other municipalities haven't raised. So for example, one of the things I note here is that there's a requirement that if they get a complaint about the content of any document that's in their storage system, that we can be required to remove content. So I don't know as a municipality whether we're ever allowed to remove content from a government record. I mean, that seems to me more geared to a situation where there's a private concern about someone saying something that offends somebody or something. But as a government body, even if there's something objectionable in the document, I don't know that we're permitted to remove content, I guess. So I'm sort of surprised no one's would have ever raised that before. I guess we might be able to solve that problem by keeping, in that situation, a paper copy or a hard copy here. So in case they asked us to remove things from stuff we had stored.
You're gonna end up keeping a paper copy
Well,
of
of everything.
almost everything.
Right. So
I don't understand the contents of the context of this discussion. Give me an example if you can, something that's really serious that would have an erosion of their policy and or be up in some kind of a litigation circumstance.
where we would have a conflict. Okay.
Yes.
So the stuff we talked about earlier for executive session, if there are, one thing we do is we keep, I assume we keep records of police complaints or police investigations. Do we do that, or is that all with you? We don't have any of that here anymore? Okay, but that would be an example. But let's say we were a municipality with a police department that kept police records. And let's suppose somebody, and we store that in the cloud. Well, first there's the access question. Who can get to those documents?
Right.
So we're required to protect that information from being hacked or being accessed by outside parties under this agreement. So that's
We're
on us.
responsible for that?
Oh, yeah, we have to.
How are we gonna do that?
Hmm?
How are we gonna do that?
I don't know, but the risk that somebody hacks in and gets at that information is not their risk. That's under this deal, it's your risk if someone hacks in.
Wait, the contract says we are required to prevent people from hacking into their
That's what you just
database.
said. That's what I heard anyway.
Well, I think it does, actually. I have to go back through that one section, but I don't know that, again, I don't think they want legal responsibility for doing, in fact,
for anything.
in fact, they start off by saying all they're required to do is to dedicate their commercially reasonable effort at doing anything for us, which in my experience isn't a real big commitment.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's not a valuable service, and other municipalities obviously have used it. We've used it. I'm just saying you need to know what you're not getting. You're getting storage, but that's about it. And my thought is, if all you're getting is storage, we better make sure that we have insurance that takes care of the other risks that are involved.
I can certainly understand their stance on this, because take all the customers that they have, they may have thousands and thousands of customers, and and all of the circumstances that all those customers would be, exposed to, they'd be ripping their files apart, on every other Thursday, I would suspect. It'd be a disaster. I don't know if they're even possible to do that and remain a viable company. Once you open one, you're going to open them all. So
And I think so, and I think some of these risks, I don't know enough about tech or about the industry, but I imagine that most of them are fairly remote. But I've personally been involved in situations where a municipal computer network was hacked, and personal information like people's social security, names, and other things were accessed by the hackers, and it caused tremendous upheaval and disruption in the community. I mean, it was a big deal.
most of those things occurred where there was a commercial entity involved. I mean, hackers are not kids in a garage somewhere today. They're businessmen to sell this stuff. And they're only going to have to go after the things that have tonnage. So they're not going to go after one file. They can't afford to turn their computers on for something like that. But I don't understand really the mechanics of either party here maintaining any semblance of order with that.
Matt, to answer your question, I think specifically if you go to 4.0, it says your usage and content. You are responsible for securing your content against accidental or unlawful loss, access, or disclosure. So that, wow. So I like to think about it as like, what if you were sending it to a storage facility and you were just sending your files and your documents to Iron Mountain or something? They would have insurance, and you might carry insurance, and if there was a fire or some catastrophic loss of that information, there'd be coverage. Now, I'm not saying it would be a good situation, but there would be insurance that would cover that. I don't know whether there's anything that covers the risk of loss to these documents.
Tell me what paragraph you're just looking at, Ron? 4.0?
4.0, that was the one that I highlighted.
Well, I mean,
If you look at 4.3 sub C, and also where it talks about subscribers' responsibilities, it says we will use commercially reasonable efforts to prevent unauthorized access to or use of the cloud. Notify of any unauthorized access or use.
Yeah, and actually, 4.0 is actually a little contradictory because
I think it is, because the next sentence.
yeah, the next sentence is they'll be responsible, and then it says you agree that you're responsible. So I had trouble reconciling that, but again, I don't quite know what they're trying to say.
How large a company is this?
I don't know.
Well, the fellow who represents it is our interface. The company's been around for about 25 to 27 years, somewhere in that range. I didn't take the time to look up and say, how many times they got clobbered, but it would be an interesting thing to do and probably not too difficult, particularly with the avenues that you have available to you.
And I have a feeling.
But if it hasn't occurred, it's likely, it gets to be slimmer and slimmer and slimmer that it will occur. Particularly with some of the security packages that are about to be introduced into the marketplace. But anyway,
And
it's still hard.
Have we looked at any other competitors?
Well, we look, you mean from a legal perspective?
No. that
Is this
provide the
the-
same services Laserfish.
Is this the only bidder?
Oh, no, we looked at a dozen. Yeah, I mean, again, we didn't get this far down the road
Yeah.
looking at contracts with any of them, but we
And
looked at
that's where
their,
I'm sort of curious whether any.
at their pricing and service.
But I'm sort of curious what the other, you're
Yeah.
saying, and my experience is they're all gonna look like this.
I-
But, and that's.
Again, I suspect, and I'm not, I mean, I think what we're doing is the right thing to do because of the possibilities. But I think if we look at any software contract with the level of scrutiny that we're paying to this, we would be terrified about what they all say. South Park did a great joke one time where they read the Apple terms of service.
Yeah.
And they were talking about some of the things that are in there that are just disgusting and absurd.
So
And- But you're right. I mean, it's
it would at least behoove us,
But no one said, wait a minute.
right.
it would at least behoove us to look at those events that have the greatest consequence to see how our insurance deals with those. That, if we didn't do that,
That's what I was saying, that go back and look at their trail. Did they get involved? Did they get enmeshed?
and at the same time
And
determine
and
what,
number two, how did they get out?
and what additional coverage do we have in the event of that?
And by the way, not to scare you further as lawyers, but take a look at 12.0. Look at the limitations on their liability.
Their exposure is $2,500
For anything.
for everything.
They could lose
For
all-
everything.
for everything.
For everything.
What's the amount of this contract?
Now I understand. I'm familiar with clauses that eliminate indirect and consequential damages. I'm okay with, I expect that kind of stuff. But to say that we won't be responsible for anything at all, it's kind of broad. But that may be what the market is, and
Well, I think rather than maybe, I think it would behoove us to look at somebody else's contract to see if it is an industry standard. And two, to check the points you're talking about with our insurance company.
That should be easy to do.
And three, the dollar amount of our contract, potential contract with them is what?
I don't know, in front of me. but I
Couple
think it's-
$1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not gonna change anything.
exactly.
Why would they?
Even if it were a whole heck of a lot more, they're not gonna change anything because then every
Okay.
contract they have out there that's been signed is not worth the paper it's written on.
Well, listen, the right question, I think, is to start with what does our insurance cover?
That's exactly right.
Is that something you can?
I don't
think of?
care about
Yeah, I'll
what
just ask
risk you
Harlan
take
specifically what
if it's
questions
covered.
he wants me to
Right.
ask, and I'll get them.
And they might even have some precedent.
And the other way you could, under a normal negotiation, if it weren't, this, this industry, is you could always go back and ask for indemnification for those risks from the vendor. But
That's reasonable.
But that's not going to happen here because they're doing the opposite. They're saying,
Right, right.
we will not indemnify you. You're going to indemnify us. And again, it's a matter of leverage.
I mean, let's just be clear about something. If there were to be a hacking incident, right, we already have exposure, which is to say we don't have computers that sit around that are air-celled. If it's connected to the internet, it's exposed. And our servers right now store confidential information, right? Sure, we have
Tax
tax information, social security numbers, right?
Yeah, that's the case in anybody that's on the face of the earth.
Unless
It
you're
is.
air-celled, unless
It
you,
is.
and some law firms, for example, are now moving to a system where data that contains, if you have medical records, if you have those computers need to be not connected to the internet. So if you need to access that data from inside the firm, you have to access it from within the four walls of the building. That's their security approach because it's the only way to really prevent this. So it's probably worth us asking our insurer anyhow, whether we throw away this cloud agreement or not, what is the risk? What do you want us to be having in terms of cyber insurance?
Let's authorize Gwen to do so.
I don't think
I'll just do it.
Do it.
It's a good idea.
Let me ask you this, Harlan, if you look at the indemnification provision, we're required to indemnify them. If I'm reading it correctly, we're required to indemnify them for anything, any losses they incur because we've breached the contract. It doesn't go beyond that.
Right, true.
So, but for the fact that there's a waiver of claims, it's not reciprocal because we don't get anything if they breach the contract other than maybe $2,500.
That's correct. That's the way I look at it.
And they can change the agreement without consent.
What was the other thing I love? They can,
Well,
a unilateral
my point
modification.
being, whether if you've got an indemnification clause that simply says, I'm going to indemnify you for my breaches of contract, even if you don't have an indemnity clause, if I breach the contract, I'm liable for the same thing.
Right.
So maybe indemnity, other than the lack of mutuality, but the breadth of the indemnity clause itself is not real heartburn.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, again, I was just eyeballing it. I normally see if there's mutuality. Same thing on the amendment. I'm looking for, you can only amend it if both parties agree. Well, we'll amend it when we feel
Well, they
like
can
it.
quit anytime they want.
We'll amend it anytime we want, and you've agreed in advance to whatever we want to amend.
Well,
it
none
to.
of that, they can terminate anytime they want.
Right. So, I mean, not my favorite. As the purchaser, giving you legal advice as the purchaser, I'm not thrilled with the language, but it may be a take it or leave it proposition is what I'm saying.
So you get your contract of adhesion defense, even though that probably wouldn't fly in California.
What would?
So we beat this up enough for
Laserfish
tonight.
Cloud Solution, a claim or loss arising out of or concerning the screen. Yeah, $2,500. All right. Will we talk to our insurer, please, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the non-uniform pension plan ordinance.
I move to adopt the non-uniform pension plan ordinance.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there any other old business? Turning on new business. There has been a request by a resident to purchase now a portion rather than the entire, a portion of the park. How, Gwen, can there be a portion of a minuscule property?
Well, it's a 30-foot section, 30-foot wide section that he's asking
Uh-huh.
about. So he lives adjacent to the park property. The park property is an L, kind of in this direction. And it goes from Ingleside to Weber in the long section, and then there's a shorter section where there's a house over here. So over here, resident is here. And some years ago, before my tenure, he had purchased a section, a strip of that property because his house was very close to it. So now he's interested in purchasing another. He was interested in the whole thing, but I said that you guys had already addressed that and weren't interested in selling the whole thing. It looks like a 30 by 110 foot sliver of the property just to give him some more buffer zone for his property. So he wanted to know.
This is a buffer for what?
Buffer, well, for being a park or just to give him a little bit more breathing room in his yard. Maybe he has a shed there or something. So it would be a subdivision process is what it would be, but he just wanted to know if the township was interested in entertaining that process.
Does the loss of that property diminish our future use of the entire property?
Not with what we want to do with it, which is from what I understand is some benches, perhaps a gazebo down the line. It's not a large parcel to begin with, so I would have to go up and take a look at it and see if visually that 30 feet would seem to make a significant difference to it.
If he's only interested in it for a buffer for his other property, would he be willing to accept a deed restriction that would impose that limitation on use?
Yes. I mean, there's a 15-foot side setback, I think, in that for anything anyway. So we couldn't do anything within 15 feet of the edge. So that's, couldn't put anything up right against the park property.
Is there a dollar amount involved?
This was just a phone call saying, is the board even willing to consider talking about it? So
Is it worth more than $1,000?
Well, if you're gonna, yeah, I was gonna say, you're gonna get into an appraisal and a public bidding situation if you decide to sell.
My inclination is no, for substantially the same reasons that we weren't inclined to sell the entire property. But
I don't think that takes a motion.
well, there's no motion. I mean, so I hear the offer slipping by with no motion being made.
Right.
I think you should tell them that you suggested it and
no, thank you.
no motion was made.
Then I will give you very high marks for your sign language.
I draw in the air.
Okay, any other new business?
Yes, a resident approached me, noted the increased activity by young children on Rockledge Drive, and suggested that we consider the installation of Watch Children or Children at Play signage.
So do you have a motion?
I move to allow Gwen, in concert with the Public Works Department, to proceed with that in an appropriate fashion.
I'll second that.
So moved.
Is there any further discussion? I should say that just, not that it matters, but it wasn't us.
Correct.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you to the concerned resident. Rockledge Drive is getting a lot of kids on it these days. Any other old business, new business? Citizen participation. Yes, sir.
Tom Jarvie, 108 Deepwood Avenue. I noticed that it's no longer on the old business about that dump truck we have on River Road. It's never changed. That used to have a tent over and the tent
Oh.
was taken off.
Yeah.
I just wonder,
Is your car still parked out, a truck still parked out there? Nice going.
I have talked to Officer Hartzell about this also, and he said that there was a citation filed on June 19th, 2017. So as of today, he has yet to respond to the situation. So at the end of today, it would be 30 days. And he is going to check with the magistrate. I don't know whether the magistrate has discretion. I don't know how it works, but to see what the next step, the magistrate, do they time or do they issue warrants or something like that. So he's going to check with the magistrate about what the next step is, and we'll get back to him.
Okay. We'll know more next month. Any other citizen participation? Okay, hearing none, we will be going into executive session now for the purposes of discussing litigation with respect to the Masonic lawsuit and with respect to, is there anything else we're going to be discussing in the, complaints
Receive
of
further information from the
From-
police chief.
concerning a ongoing investigation
And rate structures.
and rate structures with respect to the Sewickley sewage contract, right? We will not come back on video when we come out of the executive session. So for all intents and purposes, this will be the end of the public meeting, although we will come back on the record in order to close out our public meeting. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.